Good evening, professionals. In our labor code discussions, we are in the ninth corporate law webinar series. And we have started this labor code by studying the fundamental aspects of the new labor code, the salient features of the code, the industrial relations code, the first phase of the code we are going to conclude today and, and we will proceed with the second code from next Wednesday series. Today, let's conclude this IRC commencing with chapter 8. We completed till this mechanism of arbitration conciliation proceedings in our previous Wednesday week. And today we are going to discuss about the most important industrial disputes, the erstwhile provisions and the current IRC code, strikes, lockout, layoff, retrenchment, and few miscellaneous provisions to conclude this IRC provision. With this brief introduction, let's get into today's webinar. My sincere thanks to Aishwarya for this detailed presentation, including contribution to various case laws on the subject. Today's outline will be, let's see a comparative analysis of strikes and lockouts, which will be none other than the definition of these two provisions as set out in the erstwhile provisions and also in the new industrial relations code. Then we will see the salient features of layoff, retrenchment and closure, and three important case laws on the subject, which deals with retrenchment, layoff, lockout, and the fundamental right as enshrined in our Constitution, Article 19(1)(g), the right to practice profession, whether it includes the right for any establishment to close down or shut down its operations. So we are going to see the fundamental rights as well in line with these strikes, lockouts, layoffs, and a contribution by the employer to a fund called worker reskilling fund where there is a retrenchment. What will be the contribution to be made by the employer and what is to be specified for contribution to the appropriate government? We are going to see in that worker reskilling fund slide. And finally, we will conclude with unfair labor practices. We are going to see a comparative study of what was the practice as set out in the previous provisions of Industrial Disputes Act 1947 and the current code. Let's start with strikes and lockouts. Let's see the fundamental provision of what is a strike. As per the definition, it is cessation of work or concerted refusal to continue to work. These are the meanings as per the definition section. It also has an inclusive definition which says it also includes concerted casual leave by more than 50% workers on a particular day. So cessation of work or concerted casual leave, but this concerted casual means leave by a group of workmen which comprises more than 50% on a particular day. So all these three events would constitute strike. Then what is lockout? It is temporary closing or suspension of work or refusal by an employer to continue to employ any number of persons who are employed by him. The strike is a weapon available for the employees and lockout is a weapon available for employers. And the period is temporary in both the cases because we all believe in the concept of going concern, and hence for an establishment to have a permanent perpetual succession, which is the salient feature of a company or an organization, this strike or lockout could be a temporary event only. IRC section 62 is a charging provision which deals with the strike and lockout, where it says that an employer shall not go for a lockout without giving a notice. Likewise, an employee cannot afford to go for a strike unless and until there is a prior notice given. So this prior notice is as enshrined in the IRC, where it says that 60 days notice for striking off, or it is this strike off prior notice shall be certainly given to the establishment while this particular right is enforced by the employees, or during the pendency of any such proceedings, be it your conciliation proceedings, which we discussed in detail last week in chapter 7. So if there is going to be any conciliation proceeding, that is an alternate dispute mechanism which is availed for what? For the purpose of resolving the dispute between employer and employee. Or if there is going to be any continuation of arbitration proceeding or 60 days after that. Likewise, for conciliation proceedings, immediately next 7 days after this conciliation is done, a strike shall not happen. And during the impending proceedings before any tribunal, for this court purpose, the tribunal, as we already discussed, will be your industrial tribunal or your national industrial tribunal. So in these two tribunals, if there is any matter which is pending for resolving the dispute amicably between these two parties, the parties herein refers to your employer and employee, in which case during the impending proceeding or 60 days after the proceedings or within 14 days of giving this particular notice or before the expiry of the strike period, if you are going to call out for another strike. So all these shall not happen. So all these provisions as specified in your section 62, be it for your strike or for lockout also, similar provisions are available, where it again clearly says that there shall be a prior notice given, and during these impending proceedings, be it your conciliation or arbitration or your tribunal proceedings, or during the course of settlement or award in the case of any operation, as more particularly specified in the code, this strike or lockout shall be carried out only in consonance with that. Friends, the significant difference between the previous Industrial Disputes Act and this code will be, earlier it was applicable only for public utilities. Now it is imperative for us to understand that this particular compliance is required for all establishments, which means it is not restricted only to public utilities. It will be interesting to note that the standing committee, while they made recommendation, also had restricted the scope only to public utilities, but when the code was notified, it was made applicable to all industrial establishments. A notice is given or received by the employer. Notices will be given to the employer when it is for strike. And notices will be given to the employer and it is sent to the employer when it is for strike, and it is given by the employer when it is for lockout. So in both the events, it shall be reported to the appropriate government. We have already discussed that appropriate government will be, in the case of undertakings which are run by your central government, it is the central government, and if it is going to be the state run organizations, it will be your state government. So authority, and also to the conciliation officer in the case of your alternate dispute mechanism route adopted within 5 days of such notice being received. So you're first receiving the notice, and the second step is to intimate to the appropriate government. And no requirement of notice in cases where intimation has to be made to such authority as specified by the appropriate government on the date of giving the declaration. So there is a strike or lockout which is already in existence. Then intimation to the appropriate government or to the concerned authority will suffice the requirement, and hence the first step, which is the notice to be given by the employee for strike and the employer in the case of lockout, does not arise. And strike or lockout which happens in contravention of this charging provision, which is section 62, that is the period of notice and intimation to the appropriate government or concerned authority or conciliation officer, if this is getting violated, then such strike or lockout shall be construed as illegal. And also section 62 draws reference to any strike or lockout which is in contravention of section 42 subsection 7. Friends, last week we discussed in chapter 7 about the alternate dispute mechanism route available in the case of arbitration when there is a notification given and majority of the parties in this particular code reference will be your employee and the employers. When the majority of the parties agree to resolve the dispute by way of this alternate channel, which is your arbitration, and there is a notification given that this particular dispute shall be resolved through arbitration, then any strike or lockout shall not occur during the continuation of these arbitration proceedings is as provided in your 42(7). So if any strike or lockout is going to happen in violation of this 42(7), also it will be construed as illegal. Next comes your layoff, retrenchment and closure. We completed chapter 8, now we are in chapter 9. So what do you mean by layoff? It is failure, refusal or inability of the employer to provide work. It could be due to various reasons, including your shortage of raw materials or natural calamity. Say, COVID, this is an unprecedented situation and several establishments are opting for this particular layoff route. Then the natural calamity, if it is well covered within this particular provision, because it is an act of superior force, and then it is construed as layoff. Exception is when workers are retrenched, then it will not be construed as layoff. Then what is retrenchment? Retrenchment means termination by the employer of the services of employees for any reason otherwise than a punishment which is imposed by way of disciplinary action. So if there is going to be termination of an employee because of his misconduct, then it will not be construed as retrenchment. What is closure? I am winding up, I am shutting down my operations because of no profit or because of lack of business or various other reasons. I am not interested in pursuing the operations, which is permanent closure of my business or part thereof. In all the three events, it is imperative to note that adequate notices shall be given. Similar to your strike or lockout, where adequate notices and the periodicity has to be complied with, here again, for be it your layoff or retrenchment or closure, adequate notice shall be given. Like your strike off or lockout, when there is going to be an intimation to the appropriate government or authority. Similarly, for your layoff, retrenchment or closure also, you have to do onward reporting to the appropriate government or authority or conciliation officer, as the case may be. Here comes the compensation to be given to workers. Laid-off workers shall satisfy the preconditions. They are called as condition precedent as per the code. So in order to provide them compensation, they have to comply with the CPs. What are they? They should be on the rolls of the establishment and they should have completed at least 1 year of continuous service. So there shall not be any break in their services, and these employees shall not be badli workers. That is, those who are employed in the place of other workers or casual workers. So if they are going to satisfy these conditions, and then they will be entitled to this compensation, which shall be during the layoff period, no doubt, except for weekly holidays, for an amount equivalent to 50% of their total of basic pay plus dearness allowance. And retrenched workers, the first component is for your laid off workers. The second component of compensation is for your retrenched workers. Their compensation shall be equivalent to 15 days average pay or average pay of such days for every completed year of continuous service or part thereof, where the part thereof shall be over a period exceeding 6 months. What happens in the case of transfer of ownership or management? Say, for example, there is an amalgamation and hence this particular transferor is no longer in existence and the transferee company is assuming all the rights and obligations of your transferor company, and this company is deemed to be a dissolved company, the transferor entity, in which case the worker who has been in continuous service for a period of at least 1 year shall be paid compensation as if he had been retrenched, provided if the worker is affected by the transfer, which means in your scheme of arrangement, if you're going to say that the employee from the transferor to transferee is going to be having the same terms and conditions as that of the transferor company, and he is not having any remuneration diminish, and he is going to have the same emoluments in the transferee company as well, then he is an unaffected party, right? In which case there shall not be any compensation. Otherwise, compensation he shall be entitled as if he was retrenched from the organization. What happens in the case of closure? Again, he should have rendered service for at least a period of 1 year. he shall be entitled to be served notice. We already discussed that, like your layoff or your retrenchment, for closure also adequate notice shall be served, because the employee's interest should be protected and he should not be left to surprise. And compensation, as if he had been retrenched, he shall be entitled there. And the amount shall be not exceeding 3 months average pay. Why there is a cap? Because already the company is in financial distress. So there is a maximum ceiling of the amount to be paid to the worker. And undertaking which is involved in mining operations, there is a specific provision which says which is closed down due to the exhaustion of minerals. Compensation will not be paid if service of worker is not interrupted by the alternate employment. Similar to your transfer or this amalgamation example which we discussed, only if the worker's rights, the terms and conditions are affected, he will be compensated and not otherwise. And in the case of construction workers, say for example, the project is for a period of 2 years, but the project is getting completed for a period lesser than 2 years. Will he be entitled to compensation? The section clearly says that the code also reiterates, as specified in the erstwhile provisions, that he will not be entitled to any compensation for the deficit, but if the work is not completed within the period, say it is exceeding the period of 2 years, then the worker will be entitled for compensation. Let's see some interesting case laws relevant to this particular subject. Here, this management of Karbetta estate in Kotagiri was the appellant, and Rajamanikam and others, they were the respondents. Here the manager was seriously injured by the workmen, and other workmen were also threatened that they will be murdered by few concerted workers. So few workers were threatening not only the manager but also few other workmen. And because of this, the division, on the fear that there will be several damages caused to many other workers, this particular division was shut down and it was not reopened. The workers treated this particular period when this division was shut down as layoff period, and they claimed for compensation. And to claim this compensation for the back wages during this layoff period, they made this particular approach before the labor court. Labor court allowed their claim and thus mentioned that they were entitled to the claim. This agreed party, which is your appellant, made an appeal before the Supreme Court. Agreed by this particular order, they stated that this layoff was not due to the inability of management, and the layoff was not arising due to the shortage of raw materials as per the definition given in your provisions, the definition of this particular code. The lockout, the erstwhile provisions in your Industrial Disputes Act, which was your 2 subsection KK. The lockout is a tool available to the employer, like the weapon available to employees, which is the strike. And clearly, the appellants made this contention that this present case was a lockout and not a layoff. The Supreme Court clearly upheld this particular appeal made by the appellant company and stated that the lockout was fully justified, and this particular lockout in the present case was not a layoff, because the layoff will happen only due to the inability of the management where there is shortage of raw materials. Here it was clearly a dispute caused by a couple of workmen and not because of the action caused by the employer, and hence the respondents, being the group of workers, were not entitled to any back wages or compensation, and the appellant's plea was thus allowed by the Supreme Court in its decision during 1960. The second case is your Municipal Corporation of Greater Bombay versus your Labour Appellate Tribunal of India. Here, the appellant company had issued a show cause notice to the worker due to some misconduct. Enquiry was held and it was found that the worker was not a fit person to be retained in this particular organization, and thus his services were terminated. This case was first made before the Labour Court. Agreed by this particular termination order, this workman filed a case before the Labour Court asking for reinstatement to take him back for employment, and also he claimed for compensation for his illegal discharge. The Labour Court thus allowed his particular plea. An appeal was made by the establishment before the Bombay High Court. Agreed by this order, and Bombay High Court clearly held that the services were terminated due to disciplinary proceedings. Already we discussed in the definition section that retrenchment will happen in all cases where it is other than by way of termination due to misconduct or disciplinary proceedings which are initiated against the employee. Here, due to his misconduct only, this particular employee was terminated, and hence it was not retrenchment, and Bombay High Court clearly held that the compensation or reinstatement of this particular employee will not happen, and this particular appellant's plea was thus allowed by Bombay High Court. The third case is relating to your fundamental right of whether right to practice the business also includes the right to close down or shut down the business. Excelware versus Union of India. The relationship between the management and the workers was not conducive from 1974, and it was even worse starting the year 1976, and thus the workmen were indulged in illegal, unjustifiable strike. There was an application made to the appropriate government, because we already discussed that be it your erstwhile old provisions of IDA, Industrial Disputes Act, or your IRC, Industrial Relations Code, the serving of notice was there, and also onward reporting to appropriate government was there even before. So it became impossible for the company to pursue its business and thus serve notice to the appropriate government. And the government refused this particular approval. Hence, an appeal was made to Supreme Court. Agreed by the order of the appropriate government, the appellant company made an appeal to Supreme Court. The right to carry on the business also includes the right to close down the business. The company had expressed its inability very clearly to continue or pursue its operations, and thus served notice in compliance with the provisions to close the undertaking. And hence, it would be inappropriate to say that the company cannot shut down its business, and it will be impeding with the fundamental right of carrying on the business, because carrying on the business also includes the right to close down the business. Thus, the court, Supreme Court, in its judgment on 29 September 1978, clearly held that it is just because employees become unemployed, and it cannot be used as a justification for not allowing the employer to close down the business, and hence it is just an equitable approach for granting the fundamental right of the employer also to close down or shut down the business. And thus the court held that the impugned provisions relating to the closure in IDA constitute unreasonable restriction on the closure of business, and it is constitutionally invalid in violation of your Article 19(1)(g), which clearly provides the right to practice any profession or carrying on any occupation, which includes your trade or other businesses. There is a specific chapter on your worker reskilling fund. This fund is set up by appropriate government by virtue of a notification, where the employer's contribution to take care of the retrenchment of the employee shall be an amount equivalent to 15 days or such number of days as may be notified by central government. The wages loss drawn by the worker immediately before the retrenchment shall be considered for this purpose. And contribution from such other sources, we are yet to see as to what is going to be prescribed by the appropriate government in the recently notified code. The fund shall be utilized within 45 days of retrenchment of the workman, and the account of this particular worker who is retrenched shall be credited within this 45 days of retrenchment, and the amount shall be equivalent to 15 days of wages lost drawn by him. Finally, we have unfair labor practices. Previously, we had unfair labor practices as provided in 5th schedule. Now, it is as set out in your 2nd schedule. Unfair labor practices on part of the worker or the trade union of this worker to stage or encourage or instigate such form of coercive actions which are willful, which also includes your go slow production. Go slow production is again clearly defined in the code as well as in the erstwhile provisions of the act, where it is an occasion where more than one worker joins with another worker or few other workers for this coercive action of going slow in their production with lesser effort to yield lesser production than which is usual. So usual is also explained in the code, which says anything which is far below the standard as specified for a worker or such if nothing is specified. So the standard what has to be produced by a worker, if it is not defined or as specified, then it will be average of his 3 months productivity, which is taken on a periodical basis. If that is going to be meeting the parameter of go slow lesser than the standard which is performed by the worker, or squatting on the work premises after his working hours, or Gerau. Gerau is the encirclement, just like making an appeal before the politicians. If all the workers are going to have again a coercive action to make an appeal before the managerial or other staff, then it is Gerau. One such strike. So all these are construed as unfair labor practices, which could be by the worker or by the trade union on behalf of the workers. So the employers, workers, or the trade unions which are registered shall not commit any of the unfair labor practices as set out in your 2nd schedule. Friends, with this we are concluding the first part of your labor code, which is your industrial relations code. If we have any doubts, we will continue. Otherwise, we will conclude today's session, friends. Thank you very much for your time.